My name is Eric, and this is definitely not Jay's Talk. And I am so excited right now because I am joined by MLB.com's Keegan Matheson, author of the franchise Toronto Blue Jays, a new book published by Triumph Books. Keegan, congratulations. How is life on the bestseller list?
Hey, it's good. It's surprising. I did not expect that when this whole thing started. So it's been very humbling, very surprising. I have not believed it's real at points, but thank you to the good timing of the Toronto Blue Jays. I think that was always going to be the number one marketing ploy in all of this. So it's lined up conveniently with a really good baseball team, and it's been a hell of a month. It's been amazing.
Now, was there any consideration to wait till next year when it's the 50th anniversary season?
You know what? It was when it came along, it was late 2023. And I've learned that books move very slowly, which has kind of tested my patience throughout. But at the time, we were kind of even further from 50. Maybe the Blue Jays do something that makes me reissue it. We'll see with how well they're playing this year. But it's going to be, I'm looking forward to the 50th. There'll be a lot of history, a lot of alumni around. So maybe that's either an extension of this or the start of something else. We'll see.
We will see. Keegan, take me back to 2013, that fateful day in 2013. It's well documented. You're working in the financial industry, nice, safe, secure job, good salary. It's the type of job our parents and our grandparents would want for
Yeah.
us. You're paying into a pension, you got benefits, there's probably casual Fridays, and every now and then they bring out an ice cream bar or
Right.
whatever, and yoga and stuff like that. And you say, this is not for me. I can't do this anymore. And you walk out and you go down to a local establishment near the water, and you have a couple of IPAs, and you decide I'm going to be a baseball writer. You're gonna jump without that parachute. You're going to jump without that safety net. Is this how you envisioned it would go?
Man, in hindsight, what an idiot. That sounds a little risky for me.
It
And
worked out.
I'm normally not the riskiest fella, but thankfully it worked. It's been a long time. And thankfully I learned back then or recognized about myself that I was not a adaptable person. And that's a flaw, but at least I recognized it, I guess. And it's taken a long time to get here, but I'm very grateful for it. And even back then, I mean, I'm still in touch with so many of the people that I was around at that time, and I love them. And I was the problem, not the job, not the people.
I can't imagine
But
that.
no, but it was a necessary change, and I had to screw up a bit before I figured out what I wanted to do. And I'm grateful that I got to screw up, and there's also a level of privilege in that as well. Like I was allowed to take this risk because I had family that would have taken care of me if I had have fallen flat on my face, which is probably how this should have gone a while ago. But man, it's been a while. Soon after that, I moved up to Toronto, started covering the Jays full time in 2017 after all the fun stuff happened. So it's been a minute, but it has worked out by an incredible string of luck at a lot of different junctures. But grateful for it, man. It feels like a long time ago, but I can still picture myself on that patio, that exact place in the Halifax Harborfront at like 11:30 a.m. I was probably the first guy in that bar to order a beer that day, but worked out.
Hey, best liquid lunch ever, right?
Yes, sir.
And I have to assume, it's a good flex. Now that you're a best-selling author, it's a good flex to all the people that said, or all the people that tried to talk you out of doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. And people reach out all the time too when they'll read one of those old stories that was written about that, and they'll say, "Hey, maybe I'm going to do this." And I say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Like, don't. I'll have your husband or wife coming at me in a year saying like you screwed up our family." But it's not for everybody. I will say I was young and I could do it at the time, but it's yeah, man. I'm lucky that I had a lot of people who I don't know if they were actively supporting it at the time, but if they were at least saying like, okay, okay then, and didn't get in the way, which is a real gift. So man, worked out, but God, I don't know if I'd have the bravery to do it again. I'm not sure.
Well, let's talk about the book, the franchise, Toronto Blue Jays. People are going to go through this book and they're going to say, well, why is he putting this part in? Why is he
Yeah.
leaving that part out? And why did he only put these players but leave out these players? Uh, you know, what criteria did you use when deciding what's going to go in and what's going to stay out?
A lot of it was coming back to the core idea just of why people give a damn about this team. And I needed some sort of core idea because the history of this team's too big. And I got to be picky with this. That's the deal of a curated history. And I liked that level of control, I guess, over. That was attractive to me because if I just tried to tell the whole history, this book would suck. And every story would just be an inch deep. I wouldn't be able to get to the heart of anything. But in doing that, there's lots of people who deserve chapters who don't have chapters in this book. Pat Gillick, Tony Fernandez, the list goes on and on and on, who don't have chapters in this book. And that's not because I hate them, and it's not because I don't think they're not important. It's just a matter of the stories I did choose. Some of them because I thought I could tell them better. I thought that I could tell the Bautista, the Donaldson, the John Gibbons stories better than a Fernandez or a Gillick at this time, just based on who I was able to speak to, what I've been around for. Some of it was that wanting to tell my best stories, and the other factor that went into a lot of this was balancing old and new. Because I've written about Joe Carter's home run 1,000 times, and I wasn't even there. But just in my last 10 years on the beat, you have to write about Joe Carter's home run a ton if you're a Jays reporter.
Of
That
course.
still had to go in the book because you can't have a book without it. But at the same time, I needed some chapters that were new and that were fresh. It couldn't all just be retellings that you could find for free online, right? So some of that is with the COVID years, with Otani, with players' lives around the city, and some different research projects I was able to do for the book. I needed some new in there because this had to add something. It couldn't just be a collection of stuff I've written but made longer for a book, right? So it was a balance. I don't know if I struck it perfectly. I'm not sure, but I tried to and I wanted to, and I tried to target what people cared about, combined with what I thought I could tell best.
You mentioned the COVID years, and those chapters really stood out to me. And I don't know if I want to say love or like when anything is involving COVID, but the part that I really enjoyed in those chapters was your journey
Mm,
during that time. You going to Florida in 2021 when nobody was going there, and obviously Florida was not as strict as it was in Ontario, and all the things you had to go through just to cover the team, where you had to be, and I can only imagine what that credit card bill looked like when it was all said and done. One part that really stood out also was when you're in Buffalo and you're talking about, they're just about to play the first game in Buffalo, and you turn on and you close the laptop and you're watching it and you're just soaking everything in. And it was kind of you had this spiritual moment, for lack of a better term.
yeah.
Um, and I was just curious, in your day-to-day life, and because you're so busy, you're right, you're doing interviews, you're writing pre-game stories, post-game stories. Do you still take moments to close that laptop and just for even if it's for 10 minutes, you could be Keegan the baseball fan as opposed to Keegan the
Mm.
reporter.
I tried to. I used to suck at it. And that was part of why I burned out early in this job. I was really unhappy in this job for a lot of years. And that's hard to tell people because they say, shut up, you cover baseball, like you
Living the
ungrateful
dream,
bleep bleep
Keegan.
bleep, right?
Yeah.
But it's still work. It's still a lot of travel. It's still a lot of time. And while I always loved the job, I let myself get a little bitter and frustrated at times because it was also a struggle to have baseball move from something that I was a fan of to something that was more work. That was an interesting dynamic. This book honestly helped me fix that relationship, I think, because it helped me talk to people who were telling me happy stories instead of stories about when they lost type of thing. And that was important. So to be around moments like that and to talk to people throughout the process of this book, it really helped me appreciate that a bit more. And I think I'm doing a better job of that now. And I still try to, it's still a weird job where yesterday, for example, we're speaking on Thursday. So Wednesday was that big 11-9 Jays win over the Yankees. And
I was very stressed at
it's
the end of that game, by the way.
amazing. What a game.
Yeah.
But it's, to me now, we're speaking at noon, it's on to tonight type of thing. It is still work. But for example, recently in Boston, I grew up in Nova Scotia, so me and my dad went to Red Sox games as much as Blue Jays games. I'll always close my laptop for a second there and think, this is cool. This is where we would come down and do the tour. watch Mo Vaughn, my favorite player when I was a kid. This is where I would come when baseball was not work yet, when I didn't even know that baseball could be work. So it's changed for me. I'm trying to do a better job of that, and it's important I do. It's important I don't get bitter again. I let that happen, and that was a mistake. But this book helped that for sure, and it freshened me up a little bit. I hope I'm a little more pleasant to be around in the press box. I don't know.
I'm sure you are. Sticking with Boston and Fenway Park, one chapter that caught my eye was the one about Roger Clemens.
Mm,
I remember vividly Roger playing for the Blue Jays. It was a huge deal for me and a huge deal for a lot of fans. I mean, here was I mean, I was 12, 13 years old at the time. Obviously, we didn't know what we know now, but it was a big deal. This was a superstar of baseball choosing to leave his
yeah.
team and play for the Blue Jays. And as you know, he might not be the most morally upstanding character. And as you know, we kind of live in a world where sometimes if we shine a spotlight on those bad actors, those bad faith actors, the people shining a spotlight get in a little bit of trouble as well, at least online.
Yeah.
I was just curious, was there any hesitation to include Clemens in the book, especially since he was phenomenal those 2 seasons, but
Yeah.
it's very swept under the rug, which you point out in the book.
Clemens fascinates me because of that, man. It's sometimes even I remember, like, holy crap, Roger Clemens pitched here. And they were the two best years we've ever seen from a pitcher in Toronto.
Absolutely.
Not even close. Like, those are all time seasons, ridiculous seasons. But I think the way I worded it in the book was that it's like a family secret type of thing. Like, oh, okay, don't talk about Uncle Roger. It's so strange how we do that. I don't know if there's some like, buttoned up Toronto the Good baked into that. I'm not sure, but it interests me. And it's part of this team's history. Those were in the years where the Jays weren't exactly winning much either. And that was an incredible highlight. Now, history since then and the Mitchell report and everything have colored how we view that. Absolutely. But every single pitcher in Toronto, forever probably, is going to be held up against those seasons.
Mhm.
This came up a little bit when Robbie Ray was having his Cy Young season, when Kevin Gossman was having his peak seasons. Just that, you'd sort those fan graphs lists or the all time best lists, and you'd say, oh my God, Roger Clemens, you're not even close, right? So that one I needed to include. I'm fascinated by it. And man, those seasons are just out of this world.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were fun to watch. They were. I mean, that was the same time that the Yankees were dominating, with the likes of Jeter
Mm.
and Rivera and Matsui and everything. But yeah, every day he was on the bump, I had butterflies in my stomach, if you could believe it.
Yeah.
Um, let's touch on that Otani chapter. And to be
Mm.
honest, I don't really want to touch on the Otani chapter because it's still fresh in everyone's mind and everyone still
Yeah.
has some raw emotions about it. But obviously, there's you shine a light on some things that people won't know about. And if I could borrow a term from wrestling, is it fair to say Otani is a heel in this storyline, or is this just big one shade of gray?
Doing that chapter made me appreciate the Blue Jays' efforts in that a bit more. I'm not here to award silver medals. I don't think it
Right.
matters, but I don't think they got used. I really don't. And I didn't really at the time. That's always been kind of a Toronto little brother sort of thinking, always worried that we're being used by big, mighty LA or New York or something. Toronto's a real city too. It's a big market. It's not always about that. And understanding more about what the Blue Jays put into this, I think they just came second. I think you can't put Toronto on the West Coast, and that's a problem. But I came away more impressed by what the Blue Jays tried to do here and how close they got with Otani. And he got his booze when he came back. He'll always have a little bit of a villain edge in this city. But I do think that Otani's just so likable and so incredible at the sport that it's hard to really hate him. Aaron Judge is going to get his booze, but he's kind of the same thing. He's an unbelievable baseball player, and he's not the antagonist. Like he's not jabbing at people. He's a good dude. So it's hard to really turn that guy into the monster. Someone like a Rougned Odor, like that's who Blue Jays fans latch onto as the real enemy, I guess. But Otani, I don't think I can call him a heel, but he's always going to be that kind of alternate reality that people cling on to. And it was close, man. It was legitimate and it was close.
Unbelievable. You know, one thing people always also cling into recently is the 2021 season.
Hmm.
And when you're talking about that, for some reason, my brain defaulted to the early part of that season. If you remember, they're in Dunedin. They can't
Yeah.
come home. They're playing in stadiums. You know, maybe they're not allowed to. Stadiums have sort of limits as to how many people are allowed in there. And then they go to Texas for the Texas home opener. And it was a sellout, 50,000 packed people. I think President Biden even called out the Rangers on that one. But the reason why I wanted to bring up 2021, is it fair to say that, as we go on, as we have, 50th anniversary season, 60, 70, and as the years pass on, that this team will take on, a sort of a folklore, and the 2021 Blue Jays, there could be books and documentaries written about that specific team.
Oh yeah, that was their best team, I think, of this whole run. And Charlie Montoyo said it in that chapter that he was crying when they came back because he thought they could have won 100 games. And maybe if they had one more bullpen arm or one more bounce their way, I think if that team made the playoffs, they were making a run, period, like a real run, and would probably be remembered in the same way that we think about those 15 and 16 teams because they were fun. They had power. They had personality. Semyon at his best, Vladdy like an MVP, but they had Teoscar, Lourdes. Back then George Springer really at his best as well. So that was an amazing team, and there's way more to be written on those COVID years. And if the Blue Jays, for example, go ahead and win a World Series this year or something like that, it'll be something that I think is brought up even more.
For sure. For sure. When you're doing your research and you're interviewing people for the book, was there anything that jumped out of you, kind of like you had like a holy shit moment in terms of information you would come across?
A lot of that would have been in the Otani chapter, some of that, the new info, but a lot of it speaking to guys about those COVID years. I was there, but it was about baseball. I didn't really appreciate the personal life aspects, how to get your family around, how to move your life around in a suitcase all those times. Some of it too was from people who I was already close to. Whether it was the Buck Martinez chapter, Dan Schulman, like people who I consider friends and I'm around all the time. But the book was an excuse to ask them, okay, where'd you come from? What does this mean to you? Why did this happen? Stuff you wouldn't normally ask them hanging out at the ballpark, right? So that was a cool excuse. And getting to know people who I thought I already knew well, especially Buck. I love that chapter. I love that interview. But that was a special one for me.
You also had a chapter on Tom and Jerry, and for many of us, Tom and Jerry were the voices of summer. If I could borrow a line from one of your colleagues, when Ben Wagner was let go by Sportsnet, I couldn't help but feel a little bit of sadness because it seemed like the days of the long-time radio broadcaster were gone. We weren't going to get someone like Jerry who'd go 36 years, or Tom that would. Who would broadcast 4,000 straight games. And
Yeah.
I certainly enjoy what I hear now with Ben Schulman and Chris LaRue, but I have to think, Ben's probably eventually going to be moving up permanently to TV. So I wonder, what do you think the future is for baseball on the radio? Do you think that it will still have the same presence that it did in our lives for future generations?
It's different. And it's not like radio shows where there's at least some podcast pickup and where you can pivot and re-angle it. I hope it stays and I hope it carries on. And I hope that teams, including the Blue Jays, have the radio crews on the road at all of these games because when you have a big moment like that, like I think back on all of Tom Cheek and Jerry Howard's radio calls that we still listen to, that we still reference in stories, and that's important. But it's such an interesting time because how many people are tuning into the radio broadcast versus TV? And while I want radio to continue to exist forever and ever and ever, I love the form of a radio broadcast of a baseball game. There are also people looking at the money and the dollars and cents of it in a media industry that's not exactly thriving right now. I think everybody knows that. So I hope there's ways that it can work for everybody because especially as a different path into this. I love that people are still chasing radio broadcasting, like Ben Schulman and Chris LaRue when they're doing these games. I love that there is that call. And for someone like Ben, who may eventually, I don't want to speak for Ben, but may eventually have aspirations to be doing more TV. He's already done some this season. He's incredibly talented at that. That can also be a pathway. And I think of as this city loses beat writer jobs or even loses internships, you're losing those pathways in. And I hope we don't lose out any voices in that. But I'm always a fan of the radio broadcast, though, and I hope it sticks around for as long as I'm around. And even though there's challenges with it, I'm very hopeful it sticks.
Oh, amen. Amen to that. John Gibbons got to write a forward in this book.
Yeah.
So nice of him. Did I detect a little shot at the current administration there?
I don't know from Gibby. I think he knows how to wink at the camera and leave everybody laughing. But Gibby was great. So I didn't even plan on that actually. But after I spoke to him for his chapter, the conversation was just so good. I said, you know what, Gibby, how about I got an idea for you? And he said, sure. At first, he asked me to write it and make him sound good. Eventually, I had to convince Gibby to do it himself. But he was the first manager I covered.
Right.
And I've got all the respect in the world for him. Everyone you talk to about John Gibbons says the exact same thing, which is that behind the country boy persona and the jokes is a really, really smart guy. And they're right, man. He's one of a kind.
People love Gibby, but there's that old expression. Managers get too much credit when they win, too much blame when they lose.
Yeah.
So, I always wonder, is his popularity because of who he is, or obviously with what happened in 2015 and 16 play a role. So, in other words, if 2015 and 16 do not happen, does he get a chapter in your book?
Probably not, because he was still the same dude back in his first time with the Blue Jays, and I remember a whole bunch of fire Gibby, So it's the perfect match. Once the Blue Jays won, Gibby soared higher in this city than any other manager would have because he already had that personality there, and it was a perfect match. You, I think that if he was a boring analytics-driven manager, we wouldn't be talking about it like that. But he was the perfect manager for those teams because they were all personality. Bautista, Donaldson, Stroman, Encarnacion, Martin, Tulo, like on and on and on. Every one of those dudes is the biggest personality on this year's team, and I think it's not close. Gibby had the gift of wrangling that and knowing when to get out of the way, when to let the players do it themselves. But I've never heard of a more beloved manager, though. I have never heard someone say a bad word about playing for John Gibbons, and that's extremely rare.
And when he was managing Skydome, Skydome was packed. And I love the fact that you use the word Skydome
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of mainstream media, and I hope you don't mind me putting it in that category,
Yeah.
but there it's always Rogers Center. And if they have to, if they have to talk about the past, it's well, then it was known as Skydome. But you had no problem putting it in that word or putting it in the book. It's hard to imagine them playing anywhere else. And
Yeah.
you know, do you think that that's talk will continue, or are we good with the renovations?
I think the Renos are good for a while. I think maybe, let's call it 15 years from now, maybe that starts again. And I remember asking Mark Shapiro that, and he kind of reacted the way that I react now when people say, like, how about another book? Because I asked him, okay, what's next? And he was like, Keegan, come on, man. We just spent a $500 million here. Let's enjoy it for a year. But he's always thinking that way, and he's very sharp with those things, very sharp. And he was kind of thinking that 15, 20 years down the line, maybe it's another conversation. But like Paul Beeston said, the location of Rogers Center
You
is
can't
the
beat
best thing
that.
about it.
Yeah.
Cannot beat it. When I go to road cities and I'm up off the side of a highway, like it would be like having Rogers Center out by the airport or something here in Toronto. I would hate that. The fact that people can walk around downtown, get off at Union Station, take transit, bike, walk, drive, whatever. You can't beat it. It's the best location in Major League Baseball, and I think they should cling to that land forever. And they've kind of got that land forever, so it's a pretty sweet setup for them.
A lot of fans are always criticizing the ballpark, and I always wonder, do you think that's because they're just not aware of where the Blue Jays used to play, Exhibition Stadium,
Yeah.
or is it just simply, we live in a society where we want the next shiny new thing, and Skydome's not that shiny new thing anymore?
Oh, always. And I think the Renos help that a little bit, but it's still a big hunk of concrete. And some people might want the more like retro classic, like a Camden Yards or Detroit, something like that, that feels a little more like a ballpark. But Toronto works, man. And that roof is the best thing going.
Mhm.
When I'm on the road and there's a rain delay, I lose my mind. Like, what are we doing here? Come on, it's 2025. Get a roof. But the option to play with the roof open, or close when it's raining. I think if you gave Blue Jays fans one, like just leave the roof open for a year and see how Jays fans enjoy it, they'd hate it. So that roof, whether people realize it or not, is one of the best things about this organization because it saves you from a lot of long days, a lot of 10 p.m. first pitches in the summer. It's a pretty special thing.
Oh, it certainly is. It certainly is. Now, you kind of hinted at it, but let's say 10 years from now, Triumph Books comes back to you and
Mm.
says, "Hey, let's do an updated version for the 60th anniversary season." Uh, are there any specific chapters you kind of think you might? Do you have an idea of what kind of chapters you might write, or players, or events?
Yeah, there's probably a Vladdy chapter by then. There's probably a Vladdy book by then, honestly. Vladdy is now you need to win some World Series. You need to win a playoff game first, but he's on track to be the greatest Blue Jay of all time. Like with the amount of time he has left in this city, he's got as good a shot at that as anyone will ever have. And as long as he has some postseason success, he should probably own every record this team has if everything goes according to plan. So there's probably more Vladdy. For this book, I just wrote Vladdy's prospect years and his 2021, which were two things I kind of wanted to freeze in time. And I didn't want to write a chapter tearing down his 2024 or something like that because publishing is slow. By the time it came out, I would look dumber than I do most days. But I liked those two chapters to freeze in time. But 10 years from now, there's probably a Vladdy something. Maybe there's a Bo Bichette something if he sticks around. But if I was to go back anymore and add to this book, I would be interested more about front offices and team building. That includes Gillick going back through Anthopoulos, Ash, Ricciardi, all the GMs who've been with this team. Didn't want to get into it too much in this book because that's one where if I'd done it, I would have wanted to do it pretty deep. And I didn't think that I could do it right in this book. I'd also like to explore more of the broadcasters. And this one, I did Tom and Jerry, I did Allison Gordon, Dan Shulman, and Buck Martinez. But I could keep going on that too. And I'm a media nerd, I know that most folks aren't, but I really believe in understanding how the stories of this team have been told as well. That really interests me. So I'd probably expand that a bit too. But yeah, Vladdy's going to force either a book or a few chapters here in this next decade, I'm betting.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. Now, Keegan, we're recording this on July 3rd, and it will be published on July 11th, next Friday. So, for anything late July and August, do you have any book readings or events coming up?
We should be getting some more scheduled. Now, at first, we did a launch at Sportsnet Grill, and we did a great signing at another story bookshop on Roncy last week. And early on, the publisher had been saying, okay, let's do a few more. And I was kind of hesitant. I was like, if you keep doing these, eventually you'll get to the one no one comes to, right? So thankfully, we haven't gotten there yet. So I will be booking some more soon that I'll share around. I'd like to kind of schedule a couple around Blue Jays games, whether it's a pre-party, an after-party, something like that. And then in early August, I'll have the exact date soon, but we're going to do a paperback release as well. So that's good news because it means that people have bought the hardcovers. So we'll do a paperback release that we'll be able to keep in stock a little more going into August. And ideally, people are still talking about this team. So it'll be a fun couple of months.
Well, fingers crossed for that. I looked up, I had to Google what the top award was for Canadian nonfiction. I believe it's called the Hillary Weston Award or something
Oh,
like that.
that
So,
sounds prestigious.
well, the reason why I wanted to look it up is to ask you, have you started preparing a speech just in case?
Oh my Lord, I don't think we'll get there. Even the Globe list and the Toronto Star list, I'd like it's not fake humility. I just didn't even think that was possible. I didn't This is a new world to me, and I did not think a silly little baseball book would get that far. When I was in whatever city I was in when it first ranked on the Globe list at 5 or 3, whatever it was, I think it was my aunt had texted my mother, and they're texting me. It's on the list, and I'm thinking, neither of you are very tech savvy. I don't think this is true. So, had my girlfriend run out and grab a Globe and Mail, which is a weird request to be sending from the road, and couldn't believe it. But it's been a gift though. Like the reaction to this, it's a new level of imposter syndrome, right? Like I got over that in my normal job, but this is I haven't done a book like this before. You don't know how it's going to go, and there's a lot of anxiety with that. So I'm really thankful to people who have read it and who have been so kind about it. It's made it fun because it was a lot of stress to write it, but it makes it worth it that people are reading it and enjoying it. It's been a gift, man, way more than I ever expected. Way more.
Well, congratulations on the book again. It's The Franchise, Toronto Blue Jays, published by Triumph Books. Keegan, all the best to you, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much, Eric. I really appreciate it.